When you think of producing on Broadway these days, Carl Moellenberg's name should come to the top of your list. Not only is he a producer, he is a very smart businessman, as well as somebody that really knows the financial market. He has now written a book called Broadway and Spirituality as a Path to Survival. And we are with Carl. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thank
Um,
you.
your book is coming out, but you really have to explain to me because you stumped me with this title. How are Broadway and spirituality connected?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it because it leads me to the reason for writing the memoir. Um, I think it will take a little bit of a lengthy answer to tell you the whole story, but my several producer friends of mine had encouraged me to write this memoir because they knew the whole story of my life going back to challenges that were created in the 1980s, which ultimately led me to spirituality, which ultimately led me to Broadway. But back in the early 1980s, before anyone even knew there was a virus called HIV, I was just coming out and found out when the very first test came out that I was positive, and obviously felt incredibly unlucky at the time. And it was a horrendous period of time, as everyone knows. That people were treated as pariahs. It seemed to be a death sentence. There was a lot of paranoia because nobody knew where it came from and so forth. But meanwhile, I continued working at my job, which at that time was in the investment banking world for Morgan Stanley and um, Goldman Stanley and others. But about 10 years later, um, I was felt with a really serious first opportunistic infection, where I was in the hospital for a very long time, and then had was on an IV afterwards at home for quite a while. And as a result of that, I clearly was not going back to the investment banking, and I had to take a long period of time to rest. And during that time, I decided that the best use of it for both myself and hopefully for others was to get involved in a lot of spirituality related courses and learning. So I studied Reiki or energy work and became a Reiki master. I took a lot of meditation classes. I studied with a shaman who emphasized the importance of outdoors. And
Wait, let's stop there. Did you do the ayahuasca trip?
I did not. It was all in New York and California, but um, but I also took some other classes where I became an ordained minister. Um, and all of this allowed me to both ground myself and heal myself, but also be able to begin to help others because I was doing things such as the Trevor Project Suicide Prevention Hotline, the Hedrick Martin, helping students there be able to get jobs, walk-in centers for various people around the city. And but at the time, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. It was completely an open book, and my T cells had gone down to a point that were completely perilous. um, besides having the opportunistic infection. So in the midst of after recovering and doing the volunteer work, I decided since I had not had the chance to do any traveling, I took a couple trips, and one of them was to France. And I'd love to read you a chapter that really is why.
Yeah.
This is the book, and there's a chapter which is called Talking with God,
Mhm.
and I'll just read it to you quickly. It's the book is set up where there are short chapters and then pictures that relate to it on the opposite page. The year is 1997, and I was sitting on the banks of the Loire River in France. It was mid-morning and the sun was warm, but the breeze was fresh and cool. I was meditating all by myself in this unbelievably beautiful and tranquil location. The previous few years had been the biggest challenge of my life. In 1995, I had survived a very bad opportunistic infection. As I looked out over the river, the sun in a clear blue sky was shining down on the river. And there was a little bit of mist too, actually, as I recall. It created a glistening, sparkling effect immediately above the river. The streaks or the boats of the reflecting sunlight were coming toward me almost mystically or supernaturally. Rowers were passing by. It was almost like a painting from
Seurat.
impressionist paintings. Were passing by smoothly on a completely quiet day, except for the sound of many birds. I had no idea at that time what I was going to do with my life. It was a blank slate, and I had not painted on it yet. I was simply thrilled to be in this moment. Little did I know it was about to become the most meaningful event spiritually that I would ever experience. Suddenly, I heard a deep male voice in my head, as strong as if the person were sitting 2 feet away from me. I realized a few moments later that it was God or a higher being speaking directly to me. The conversation went on for over 15 minutes of amazement and bliss on my part, after which I ran to the hotel to write in my diary the entire message. Um, I also took pictures of the scene, although it can't do justice to the brightness of the river and the sun sparks. But the summary of what the higher being told me was that I should not give up. I was destined, despite all odds, to have a long life ahead of me. In that life, I would be loved and supported by many friends, and I would love and give back to them equally. God told me that I was used to use that life to create more beauty in the world. I was here for a reason. That reason would come to me, but it was going to be in the arts. I contemplated what path I could take going forward to create more beauty and joy for others, and images of theater appeared to me. It was then that I decided that when I returned home, I would pursue a path to learning to help bring beauty through theaters to audiences. So that's part of the chapter. So I came back, and obviously, you can't all of a sudden wave your hand and say, now I'm a theater producer. You need to know what you're doing. So I found many mentors, took the Commercial Theater Institute class, and just threw myself into it. And between then and now, I produced over 70 shows on Broadway. It's become just a total on Broadway, West End, national tours, Australia. It's combined. It's about 70 shows, and it's become my real passion and joy. And literally, the trip from the bleakest moment to my life to spirituality to Broadway, I believe, has saved my life. And I feel vibrant, have had a lot of other life-threatening experiences since then, multiple blood clots, life-saving surgery, actually just in May when I went into emergency surgery, and a lot of debilitating side effects from having HIV or being on the medicine for 40 years. But the memoir is not really about my career. I really wrote it because so many people are suffering from a lot of difficult health challenges right now, whether it's COVID or their own personal conditions. And I was really hoping that through writing this memoir, they would be inspired to find the passion in their lives and the joy in their lives and the love in their lives to help them to go forward in a meaningful way.
Now, you've what 70 shows. I did not even know it was that many. I was given certain ones when I went to go research you, and I'm not even seeing any of the ones on your background. I'm seeing 13, American in Paris, Wicked.
Yeah.
Um, you've done Spring Awakening, Hair, Death of a Salesman, Pippin All the Way, The Curious Incident of the Jog in the Nighttime. What was your first show?
The very first show I produced was Spring Awakening, which I absolutely loved then and love to this day. And it was such a special show, um, also because some of the stars of that show were not very well known then. They were incredibly, obviously talented to the extreme, even when we met them, but Leah Michelle and Jonathan Groff and John Gallagher Jr. and others in the show have all become major stars with careers not in only in theater but film and TV, and they were getting their first break, and they were absolutely incredible with this glorious music and beautiful direction, and it couldn't have been a better first show. We had groupies that went to that show over 100 times. I discovered when I went to the final night of the show. Um, I somehow got placed in the first row, and I looked down the row, and they were all looked like high school age kids, and they started talking, comparing how many times they had been to the show, and many of them were over 100, and they screamed their way through the entire show. It was kind of a fun way to have the last night on the show.
What show was your most difficult to produce?
Um, you know, I it's probably a show called China Doll that
Oh, yeah.
was by Al Pacino and written by David Mamet. And I learned a lesson on that show. It was I was not a lead producer, I was a co-producer. And it was one of the few shows that I've done where I didn't get a chance to go to a workshop or a reading or get a chance to read the script beforehand. I went in kind of blind based on the fact that Al Pacino is, one of the best actors of all time.
You just
And
can't memorize.
um, so and we built up a huge advance based on his name before the show started. But when I went to see it, I don't know if you happened to see it, but
Oh, I did.
it was mostly Al Pacino talking or screaming on the phone to a person that we didn't see. We were hearing a one-sided conversation, and it was kind of deadly to sit through. And I felt, I felt as though it were not a show that I would have picked had I had the chance to do my due diligence that I virtually always do.
What do you look for when producing a show?
The most important thing is story. For me, it has to have a story that in the 2 to 3 hours that you have with the audience, it transforms them in some way. It helps them to think about something in a different manner. It creates a conversation that they want to have with other friends, or they're just completely mesmerized by the glorious music if it happens to be a musical. So they literally are taken to a different world. But when I talk to investors a show, I always start out with talking about the story itself, but I try to be incredibly transparent with them about all the pros and cons about potentially getting on a show. I look at the financials really closely with them. I look at the cast, the partnership team, what I think the demographic for the show will be, how it fits into that particular Broadway season. Will it have a niche where it will have a chance to grow and thrive, and be completely an open book with them. Um, and I think that's the way all investors should ask producers, that they're going to get involved with, to be with them. And it has helped me build up a really wonderful group of investors who tend to follow me from show to show.
I think right now being a producer is extremely difficult in this season past COVID because we're no longer thinking about the business of theater. And I think I'm somebody that follows the Broadway grosses. Um, and I think it's a challenging time right now to be a producer and an investor. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I totally agree. We clearly are nowhere near the end of recovering from COVID, and you have to take that into effect because tourists are not coming back to the city yet. Um, every time we think we seem to have had some sort of a break from it, another wave appears, and there are a lot of shows filling the theater. So to get enough of an audience to sustain most of them is impossible right now. And we're in a little bit of a situation where there are the shows that are doing incredibly well, and there are about maybe 5 or 6 of them that
Right.
are terrific shows, and then a lot of other shows that are just struggling to make ends meet, no matter how well written they are. And
Well, I think part of the problem right now is we're trying to satisfy two masters.
mm,
I don't think you can. I think, you can be as altruistic as your little heart desires,
mm,
but if that is not what your audience wants to see, you cannot manipulate them into seeing it. Or
no,
you can, they're never going to come back. And
they need to feel comfortable. I'm sorry.
I think they need I think we need to start thinking about the audiences, and I don't think we are.
I agree. They need to feel comfortable. They need to feel that they're being taken care of and every precaution
Mm.
is there. And um, and I think they need as much information as possible being fed to them about the situation, and about um, the shows that they may or may not want to see, so that they can pick or choose, something that they believe is going to make an amazing experience for them. And there are a lot of choices right now for them to make.
I think part of the problem is that right now people want entertainment. They do not want to be preached to. They do not want to be taught a moral lesson. They just want to be entertained. And for some reason, right now, Broadway thinks that's a bad thing. And if they would look at the grosses, they would see that the shows that people are gravitating to are entertainment. I mean, you've got one of the shows that's doing really well right now, Hadestown. And I,
Hmm.
and I can totally see why. Because you're entertained. You're taught a lesson. Actually, you're not taught a lesson. That's the brilliance of it. You're shown a lesson.
Yeah,
And
you never want to be
you
preachy, but what I loved about Hadestown too is that every single creative element of the show, I think, is spectacular. Whether you're talking about the sets, the costumes, the lighting, the turn,
music.
the turntable. I mean, it's a brilliant creative production with wonderful music and a terrific cast and director. So I do think people leave there feeling both entertained and, you know,
Satisfied.
transformed and satisfied. Yeah.
What is the show that got away either because it came before you got to it or because something happened?
You know, a show that I absolutely love, I would put it in the top 5 of my all-time favorite shows, and I did not get a chance to be part of the producing team, is Once.
Mm.
I tend to like more intimate, small shows that don't have huge song and dance numbers, but that have really pretty music. And the Once album I could listen to over and over again. It's just glorious, as much as I like the movie also. And you really become emotionally connected. It's all one set. It was a love story, although it didn't necessarily end, in a happy love story. But that was a show I absolutely would have loved to be part of the producing team. But at the time, I didn't know a number of the lead producers on it. Later on, I actually did get to know 3 of them, and we wound up being involved together on the band's Visit, which again is a small, intimate show with one set, really pretty music, and it has the message of cultural unity, which I think is such an important message, with a chance meeting of Israelis getting lost and winding up in a really small Arab town with their powder blue band uniforms on. It was just a beautiful show about bringing different cultures together and supporting each other. And it was a lot of the same group of people from Once were on it. So I'm glad I connected with them later on, but I wish I had been part of Once also.
What shows do you have coming up that you're looking forward to introducing?
Well, I'm going to be a lead producer on a play that hasn't been officially announced yet. So I can't say a lot about it except that it's um, it's a funny play with 3 well-known, very talented actors. It also is very revealing in what the 3 actors who are part of a family discover about their interfamily relationships. And it will be coming early 2023. I also, besides being doing Broadway work, what I have coming up is a film, an independent film that we're in editing now, a feature film for studios that I'm doing with Alex Dinaleris writing it, who's done a lot of writing for Broadway on feet and also for movies like Birdman. It's an incredible story that I happened to find, and I teamed up with him to do it. And I'm doing a documentary on gun control,
Oh,
and also bringing this incredible a cappella group from Windsor Castle. They actually live in Windsor Castle in the same vicinity with the Queen, and they sing both secular music and are branching out into Broadway and more um, popular song music and their religious, madrigal type tradition. We're bringing them to New York to introduce them to America in a big way for the first time, and that will be in February at Town Hall. So I'm kind of branching out from music to Broadway to documentaries to film all in the next 6 months.
what is the question that I haven't asked you that you would like our readers to know about you?
That I think it might be summed up by why I have a gold bird on my cover.
Uh, I know
And
why the cage bird sings.
you might be wondering why there's a golden bird, and this is another chapter in the book, and it happened right after I had been ordained as a minister, and um, it was a bright spring Sunday morning. I'm reading quickly from another chapter. When the ordination took place, I left the space in Midtown and decided to walk home about 25 blocks on a gorgeous day. I turned onto Fifth Avenue and suddenly noticed a golden bird that I would never imagine would be in New York City. It seemed to belong in the Caribbean or some other tropical climate. And the bird proceeded to fly or walk with me for 25 blocks down Fifth Avenue. It would look at me, walk a bit with me, fly ahead, turn around and look for me to catch up. I was sitting there, walking along going, what is this? And several other people on the street were pointing at it and looked excited. And they didn't know that the bird seemed to be personally escorting me home. And I was astonished. So I began talking to the bird about 10 blocks along the walk, hoping that I wouldn't be committed to Bellevue in the process of that. But when we got to my street at 25th Street, I told the bird that I had to turn west to get home. And the golden bird sat there and looked at me for about 30 seconds. And then it flew right at me, grazing my hair, and it flew away. So I knew that something really extraordinary had happened to me. And I called my teacher to tell him about it. And he seemed less surprised than I was and said it was clearly a sign that I was to use whatever gifts I had to serve the greater good. So I think that the lesson is that I think we need, what I try to do is to look really carefully for signs. And sometimes they're right in front of you. Other times they're kind of magnificently, surprisingly brought to you in a time you won't know. But that I look for a way to find beauty in the world and in my all small, tiny way of trying to help others find that beauty also. And then that's what I'm living for and what brings me happiness. And theater has been such a huge part of that, and intend for that to continue for some time. Knock on wood.
Is the book out now?
It's being released on October 1st. It already can be pre-ordered on Amazon and other sites. And I'll be talking, more about it, as it gets closer to the release point. But I'm excited for people to read it, and also, honestly, also a little bit um, terrified, and that's maybe too strong a word, but I'm a very private person usually and form a very close inner circle of friends who I tell everything to. And now my life is becoming literally an open book, and some things that are really private about me, such as my living with HIV for 40 years, I'm sharing with the world, and I'm hoping that that will be accepted in the for the reasons that I'm doing it. And
Why wouldn't it be?
you know thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't accepted, I'd be stunned at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us. I look forward to reading this book, and you're a very special person.
uh
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I hope our paths cross again along the way, because you seem like a wonderful person yourself.
Thank you.